National Arts has been made possible by Low Real Estate Group at Path Realty, proudly serving the Shepherdstown community in West Virginia for nearly a half century, providing commercial, leasing, rental, marketing, and consulting. Hi, I'm Mike Baker, and welcome to National Arts. This Emmy-winning television series features some of the finest visual and performing artists in the tri-state area. Season 2 promises to be equally rewarding as we feature highlights from chamber music festivals, classical artists, poets, playwrights, cartoonists, stained glass window artisans, even a Broadway actor. So without further ado, let's get started. Our special guest this week is poet and novelist Stephen Altman, whose novella Blues for the Muse is a tribute to poet John Keats, whose penchant for poetry far outweighed his interest in studying medicine. Stephen discovered Keats as a postgraduate student. He is and will always be my guiding light, says Steve. 200 sonnets later, an accomplishment rarely achieved in all of literature, Blues for the Muse captures our imagination and tickles our funny bone, and with rhyme, no doubt.
He decided to become a poet at the very same age that I was when I discovered Keats's poetry. Actually, I didn't discover it. There was a professor who told me about it, and I got lucky because, unlike with a lot of the stuff I was exposed to, this really went deep right into my heart. Mm-hmm. Keats was 21 years old, I was 21 years old. We were both concerned with a lot of the same things. When you're 21, you can be pretty serious about the meaning of life and romance and mortality and all of that. He was too, but he was turning it into verse. And as the next several years of his life went by, he got better and better at it. By the time he was 25 years old, which would have been 4 years later, he was literally the greatest English lyric poet since Shakespeare himself. That doesn't mean a whole lot of people knew that, but we know that now. And he had close friends who knew that too. I was one of his close friends. It's just we were 150 years apart. We just happened not to meet. Mm-hmm. But during those same 4 years, my life was what a 21-year-old's life is as it becomes 25. But when I got to be 26, I was still there, and he wasn't. And so one of the big questions in my life after that was, what was I going to do with the time that I had? And that's been one of the big guiding, if a question can be guiding, it was one of the guiding questions of my life ever since.
The feelings that you felt in reading Keats at 21, have you carried those throughout your life?
Yes. Yes. Keats' central question, it has been a central question of mine always, which is life is full of beautiful things, wonderful things, and they all end. Life is full of things you rely on, and a lot of them go away. Joni Mitchell had a song, cars and everything comes and goes, cars and lovers and styles of clothes. Well, that was kind of a modern version of what Keats was saying, and although he was probably saying it in a little more profound way. Anyway, as it was, I was interested in those questions myself, and I found in Keats the answer, at least for me, which was that the contradiction in life, the paradox in life, that it's so wonderful when it ends, is itself what makes it so wonderful. Mm-hmm. He says in a poem called Ode on Melancholy that no one can, and we'll use my words here rather than his, he says that no one can really appreciate life unless he's willing to just go for it, go right into the depths of despair and the heights of pleasure and awareness. Mm-hmm. Those were good lessons for me, and even though I lived a quite ordinary life afterwards, it helped sustain me.
So welcome to Trinity House in Shepherdstown, West Virginia. We hosted a book signing party today for our very good friend Steve Altman, who we refer to as Alley Steve because he lives right back in back of us across the alley. Shepherdstown has many alleys, and they're just a big opportunity to meet your neighbors. So we refer to him as Alley Steve. But he has written a book called Blues for the Muse, and I believe it is a 9-year trek, if we want to put it that way. But it is a novella written in the sonnet style. So he is obsessed, I'll say, obsessed with John Keats, who he has tried to pattern the book after. So it's a great accomplishment for him, and we were happy to celebrate the event.
The job of any artist is to make the audience care about his or her obsessions. And for those of you who know Steve and have read Blues for the Muse, you know about some of those obsessions. John Keats, the British Romantic poet who captured Dad's heart and mind quite early, the Eternal City of Rome, where Dad has spent a lot of time, and also the obsession and the talent for storytelling, for ingenious rhyme making. And when I think back over the past year and a half during the pandemic, you know, most of us were binge watching Netflix or learning to bake bread, and Dad was furiously writing sonnet after sonnet after sonnet, really putting that time to good use. And there are very few people in the world that have ever written a single sonnet, let alone wrote 200 of them, let alone 200 sonnets that actually tell a complete novella. So it's truly an extraordinary accomplishment. It's a very special day to be here with all of you in what John Keats called the season of mists and mellow fruitfulness. And I'm pleased to introduce and welcome to the stage our poet of the hour, Steve Altman. Thank you.
And here's the kind of the origin story of my obsession. When I was 21 years old, and that's 50 years ago, this fall, right now, and it may be to the day, I was a first-year graduate student at North Carolina, and I took this course, English Romantic Poets. And it was the first time in my life I had read the poetry of John Keats, who at the age of 21, after spending 5 years apprenticing in medicine, had started writing poetry and gave it up, or gave up medicine in order to become a poet. He was 21, although he was born in 1795 and I was born in 1950. He was 21 and so was I. There's a word for this. This is called schmaltz. But the fact of the matter is that it holds true. He was 21 and I was 21, and he understood me like crazy. And over the next several years, we went through our early 20s together. And then he went and died on me. And at the age of 25, he was taken to Rome by a friend of his, a young artist named Joseph Severin, to spend the winter of 1820 in a climate where they expected it might not kill him, which they knew the climate of England would do, because he had tuberculosis. And in those days, what they did if you had tuberculosis was to bleed you and starve you, and then you died. When I first got to Shepherdstown, I had started about a year earlier in Rome on a bench in front of the grave of John Keats. Because when I retired from a long career in the government, the first thing I did that spring of 2011 was head for Keats's grave. And it was as enchanting and as spell-binding as you would have hoped it would be, and it changed my life. If you go, you'll see that towering over the cemetery is this pyramid, this white marble pyramid, which a Roman prelate decided 2,000 years ago would be a nice tribute to himself when he died. And so overlooking this cemetery is a pyramid, so there's mention of that in this sonnet. Anyway, there's a bench in front of Keats's grave, The whole of Blues for the Muse begins with the hero meeting the heroine at that bench, and it ends at that bench as well. Here's just one sonnet. The meadow by the old Aurelian wall was where they buried, at the Pope's decree, those sorry travelers, non-Catholics all, who while in Rome fell prey to their mortality. Above, a marble pyramid had towered for 2,000 years. Children played, the sheep would graze, the daisies flowered. And here, some decades later, Keats was laid. He died in Joseph Severn's arms, a friend whose guileless generosity belied heroic depths of feeling. With him till the end he was, and now he's buried by his side. Here on the wooden bench before their graves sits someone. When she spots Jerome, she waves. Here are a few lines from Sonnet 4. It's the beginning of the story. We're getting to see Jerome for the first time. He's in the cemetery, of course, where John Keats was buried, and he's feeling rather solemn and solitary. This is going to be in verse, so therefore keep track, if you can, of the rhymes. It gives everything a little different flavor than if it were in prose. He had a cemetery temperament, the melancholy muse inside his head that made of every moment some huge event, in this, the life of Tom Jerome. He had no dread of anything but ordinariness. And then he saw the woman in the azure dress. Here's Jerome again, who is, by the way, quite the sight to see. He's got a leather kind of sport coat on. He's got Ray-Bans and a terrible pompadour. Nobody wears a pompadour. And he has spotted Vigna, who is attending a funeral just several yards away. It was as if an ibis, something rare and unexpected, had alighted in their midst. The regal neck, the lifted chin, the elegant indifference. Her arms were bare and slim, and Tom Jerome, imagining them wrapped around him, smiled at his desire, then promptly threw all prudence in the fire and joined the mourners gathered in a ring. "Buongiorno," said Jerome. She turned her head and saw the Ray-Bans and the smile and fled. What I'm hoping, of course, is that you'll want to know these two people more. Jerome has that Hollywood thing going on, and Vigna has that mysterious Italian mobster's wife thing going on. She's fleeing from that mobster husband of hers, which Jerome will soon find out. Meanwhile, he senses certain romantic possibilities and follows her all the way to the bench in front of Keats's grave, where she sits, smoking a cigarette, which is against the rules in the cemetery. But then again, our Vigna is a rule breaker. She had a knack for smoking operatically. He said, "Could you spare me a cigarette? I need to buy a pack." She found one in her bag, and now at last he gazed on Vigna's eyes. Renaissance eyes, Florentine hair, all Italy's past glories in her face. No use in faking nonchalance. Would you come dine with me? Who'd ever guess that we'd have met like this and here? Say yes. And one thing, of course, leads to another. So that night, Vigna all but tells Jerome in their hotel room in the Aventine what he may be letting himself in for. She does that in the form of a sonnet, an anecdote about her youth. When I was 15, I was like a peach that all the local fellows have to squeeze. A peach that's dangling on the tree, and each competes to be the first to pluck it. "Please, oh please," my mama begged me, "Vigna, don't be weak." But I knew sometimes weak is strong. And was I wrong? A girl can have the world for just a song. I told her so. She dragged me off to speak with her physician. Such a kindly gentleman, a gray and proper Swiss. So full of sound advice. He reassured my mama, wished us luck, and then at midnight called me on the phone. He'd sacrifice his life for me, his wife, his work, and all he had. So I ran off with him. I'm very bad. Jerome is quite surprised to see that Vigna does not put up a fuss when Alfeo and Arcadi, the matched set of thugs her husband is sent to take her home, take her home. It's the first of several surprises Jerome is about to get. The next one is that Vigna's husband, the notorious mobster and club owner, Cesare Fumento, is a movie buff. And what he wants is for Jerome to make a movie with his money and his wife right here in Rome. Jerome thinks, well, there's a possibility here to get what I want. He wants Cesare's money and Cesare's wife. Vigna, this thing that we've been working on, is not some ordinary movie deal. I hope you understand, it's just a con. We're in it for your husband's cash. It isn't real.
Are the two most important lines that you wanted to impart at the end of your book?
There are two words that are the two most important words in the book. And they go back to the first part of our conversation where we were talking about what lesson Keats held for me. It could be that if you go to college and some professor tells you what to think about Keats, he won't tell you this, or she won't tell you this. But what I learned from Keats was that life is a complete tragedy unless you engage fully with it, unless you are aware, unless you take notes. And by the end of the story, Jerome says, take notes. I have a daughter. She and I get together every Thanksgiving and get ourselves another tattoo somewhere on us. Mm-hmm. And this year's tattoo will probably say, in celebration of my finally having finished this thing, take notes.
For we may never pass this way again.
That's pretty likely. Well, pretty likely not, I guess is the way you ought to put it.
Depending on whether you believe in reincarnation.
True. Now, I think it was Woody Allen who said, I don't want to gain immortality through my art. I want to gain immortality through not dying. But Keats, if anybody could get immortality through his art, Keats has done it. There are many, many crazy people out there who live their life with Keats in their thoughts a lot of the time. I'm not portraying myself as a fellow who goes to Food Lion thinking about Keats and forgets to buy the salmon steaks. But the guiding thoughts in Keats's philosophy are with me all the time.
Well, we really enjoyed having this celebration for Steve and his book. I hope it does well, hope the sales go well. We had a great time with the friends and family that were here today. Many flew in from the Midwest and a lot of local friends from Shepherdstown and the Washington, D.C. area, and we think everybody had a great time. We enjoyed getting the gardens ready for Steve's event, and maintaining the gardens throughout the spring, summer, and fall is very important. We're in the historic district of Shepherdstown, so lots of friends and neighbors are always coming by and visiting, and just means a lot to be able to showcase the gardens here at Trinity House. So this is called the Courtyard Garden. So we have a brick courtyard that's a little sunken down, so it's a nice little area to socialize and eat outside and have cocktails. So we enjoy that part of the courtyard, and the garden has expanded since we originally moved in. It was just the courtyard and had some viburnum bushes around, so we just expanded that out and put boxwood in, a lot of perennials, a yellow rose garden. So that's what we've done with this area right here. This garden I refer to as the tapestry garden. It's a little bit of everything, and we started with two old dogwoods. As you can see, they're native. Very architectural looking, just love dogwoods in the spring, and we just put in things as we got them and just kind of just made a path through, It's evolved over the last couple of years. Some things stay, some things go, but that's what I refer to it as, a tapestry garden, in that it's no general theme, just a lot of different flowers that we like. The magnolia tree in the center of the lawn was here when we moved in. It was in a little sad shape, so we've given it some love and attention, given it some booster shots, if you will. We designed a English boxwood garden around it last summer. It was a big hit. It's English boxwood, red roses, and some antique garden urns and other statues. It's been a great source of commentary. We've even had a couple of people that have come by and asked if we've just brought in the magnolia. So the magnolia has done, it looks much better than it has in the last couple of years. Got a lot of buds on it this year. So glad to see that it's prospering. The courtyard garden originally is just a brick courtyard. We had some volunteer trees around the perimeter. We had viburnum bushes that were pretty much overgrown, so we trimmed those back. Really kind of made them look like crepe myrtles. They let a lot of air into the patio, and then we've just built out the garden surrounding the courtyard, so it kind of envelops it from the boxwood walk all the way around the side. What we call the Rose Memorial Garden, it was here when we moved in. It was overgrown, had some roses that were not in good shape, so we've gradually replaced some other heirloom roses, and boxwoods got fronted by boxwood. We had some laurel bushes that were there originally, and so we've just cleared it out. As you'll notice, there's a lot of cat statuary, and we've collected those over the years. Big cat lovers, and so we term that our Rose Memorial Garden for some of our kitties that have gone to heaven. The Four Seasons is a new garden that we put in last year. The first year I was here, I had put in 2 Japanese maples. One flourished and another one didn't. I think it was really right next to the big majestic sugar maple that's here. So didn't look too good in the winter, not evergreen obviously. So we switched that out for 10 English boxwoods out front. And then I was able to find what's called the Four Seasons. So those are the concrete statuary depicting the Four Seasons. The house was built in 1814. It's officially called the Swearingen House, if you look up in the history books. It is in the historical tour for Shepherdstown. It is a Georgian brick house, built in 1814. 1817, I believe, John Baker and his family moved to the house. John Baker was infamous in his own right. He was the attorney for Aaron Burr.
So we are here today to celebrate the publication of local poet extraordinaire Stephen Altman for his new book, Blues for the Muse, at the lovely and incredible home of Brenda and Wayne in this gorgeous and amazing garden, which has just been the most perfect setting for such a lovely, lovely party.
Thank you for joining us on National Arts. We hope you enjoyed meeting poet Stephen Altman and hearing more about the historic Trinity House from Brenda Thorne. Until next time, remember, art was meant to be appreciated, so you be a part of it.